don't think you know everything. We're a team.
Okay.
All right? Do you think, didn't he talk to you like an adult?
Who?
Sam.
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right. All right, thanks.
She's upstairs now. With the lemon tree.
I'll use this one.
All right, sorry. Oh, here, I'll get out of the way.
No, it's fine, sorry.
Go,
You can wait.
go.
No, I'd rather you wait.
Don't worry. I always put my stuff outside anyway.
Okay.
Go. Thanks, Ab. Doing very well. Good or no good?
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna go to the bike. We're gonna have your bicycling, okay? I have the bike company in the electric, right? Hello? Good. Good.
I use that. Read this one.
Love you.
Love you.
Okay, read, okay? And turn the light on. This is not good. Okay? Don't worry about her. She gets bitchy when she's corrected, you know?
I agree.
Okay. This is not good for you. You're gonna trip. Do you hear me?
I hear you. Okay.
And double naughty, okay?
Thank you, guys.
Love you.
Love you.
She's a great shoe. Thanks for telling me to buy these. But you have a bloody nose?
No, I just like doing this because it gets the booger.
Yeah, I do that, and then I'd use it to pull it out.
Yeah.
Did you record?
Yeah, I'm recording.
Okay, cool.
Okay, cool. The subject for history is not man's will itself, but our presentation of it.
Hey, Atticus, could you listen to me?
Yeah.
Read slower and smoother. I listened to most of your reading yesterday. Not quite smooth, okay?
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
Okay. The subject for history is not man's will itself, but our presentation of it. And so for the history, the mystery presented by the incompatibility of free will and does not exist as it does for the seriology. In philosophy, history surveys a presentation of man's lives in which the union of these two contractions has already taken place. In actual life, each historic event, each human action is very clearly and definitely and understood without any sense of contradiction. Although each event presents itself as partly free and partly to solve the question of how freedom and necessary combine, what constructions of the instance of these two conceptions, the philosophy of history can and should follow a path contrary to that taken by the other sciences. Instead of first defining the conceptions of freedom in themselves and then ranging in the phonia of life. Under those definitions, history should deduce an immense quantity of which it's always appeared dependent on two elements, whatever presentation of the activity of many men or of the individual we may consider, we always regard it, and the result party of man's free and will party the law of inevitability. Whether we speak of the immigration of the peoples in the incursion of the barbarians, or the degree of Napoleon III, or someone's action an hour ago, contractions, degree of the freedom and governing the actions of these people is clearly defined for us. On the conception of the degree of freedom often varies according to the differences in the point of view which we regard the event, but every human action we examine, we see certain measure of freedom and certain measure to perceive, and the more than less freedom, the proportion of freedom to instability decreases and increases according to the point of view from which the action is regarded, but the relation is always one of the reverse proportion, sinking man who clutches at another and drowns him, or a hungry mother exhausted by feeding her baby who steals some food, a man trained to discipline who's on duty of the workman kills a defenseless man, seem less guilty, that is free and more subject to law necessary to who knows and not knows what the man is himself drowning. The mother was hungry that 20 years ago since lived peacefully and harmlessly in society seems less guilty in his action more due to the law of inevitability to someone who it the day after it was committed. Chapter 10. The conception of our free will and inevitability gradually increases or decreases according to the greater or lesser connection with the external world. The greater the world is known, where the time between the action and examination is great, and where the causes of actions are most accessible, we get the conception of maximum inevitability and a minimum of free will. If we examine a man a little dependent on external conditions, whose action was performed very recently, to whatever degree we may imagine a man to be accepted from the influence of the external world, we will never get a conception of freedom in space. Every human action is inevitability conditioned by what surrounds him and by his own body. I lift my arm and let it fall. My actions seem to me free, but asking myself whenever I can raise my arm in every direction I see that raised it in around me or the construction of my own body. I choose to follow out all of it free but necessary, that I should encounter no obstacles to conceive of man being free. We must imagine him outside the space which is evidently impossible. 2. However much we approximate the time of judgment to the time of the deed, we will never get the conception of freedom in time. For if I examine an action committed a second ago, I must still recognize that it's not being free for it. I lift it, but ask myself, could I have abstained by lifting my arm at the moment that had already passed? To convince myself of this, I do not lift it the next moment, but I'm now abstaining from refraining from lifting, nor is the air in which I lifted it at the same now surrounds me. The moment in which did not lift my arm at a moment later does not prove that I could have abstained moment of time. It could have been another. To imagine it as free, it is necessary to imagine it to be present, and the boundary between the past and the future is outside time, which is impossible. 3. However much difficulty of understanding the causes may be increased, and will never reach the conception of the complete freedom that is the absence of any action to our own or another's. The first demand of the reason is assumption of the search for a cause. For a cause without cause is conceivable. I raise my arm to perform an action independently of any cause, but I wish to perform any action without a cause. Is the cause of my action. But even if imagining a man quite exempt from all the influences, examining only his moment of the action in the present, invoked by any causes were to admit so infinitely small a reminder of inability to be equal to 0, we should even then not have arrived at the conception of complete freedom in a man, for being influenced by the external world, standing outside of time and independent of cause, is no longer a man. 1. However we may increase our knowledge of the conditions of space in which man is situated, and knowledge can never be complete, for the number of those conditions as the infinity of the infinity of the space, and therefore so long as not the conditions of influencing men are defined, but no complete inability, but certain measures of the freedom remains. 2. However we may prolong the period of time the action we are examining for the judgment upon it the period will be infinite, and while the time is infinite, so with respect to there can never be absolutely infinity. 3. However accessible may be the chain of action of any action, we shall never know, and the whole chain is endless. So again, we can never reach absolute ability. Besides this, if admitting remain the minimum of freedom to man, born a babe or an idiot completely absent of freedom by doing so, as soon as there is no freedom, there is also no man. And the conception of the action made man subject solely and law of inability without any element of freedom is just impossible as the conception of a man's completely free action. Chapter 11. In another form, but long same path of the reflection of other sciences have proceeded. When Newton... Oh my god, that's so insane! When Newton indicated the law of gravity, he did not say that the sun or earth had a property of attraction. He said all that bodies from the largest to smallest have the property of attracting to one another. That is, leaving property common to all bodies from the infinite large and the infinity small. The same is done by natural sciences, laying aside the question of cause. They seek studies for movements in the nation of humanity and not narration of episodes of the lives individuals. It too, setting aside the conceptions of the cause, should seek the laws common to inseparably interconnected in the infinity elements of free will. Chapter 12. From time to time, the law of From time the Newton's law was discovered and proved mere recognitions that the facts it was not the sun of the earth but moved sophistically, and might have been possible to retain the old conception of the movements of the bodies, but without disproving it, it would seem impossible to continue studying to the problematic worlds, but even after the discovery of the law, the worlds were still studied for a long time. From time to time, the person said that and proved the numbers of births or of the crimes is subject to mathematical laws, in that this or the mode of government is determined by certain geographical economic conditions, in that certain relation of population to soil produces migrations of peoples, and the foundations on which history had been built were destroyed in their instance. But refuting these new laws, in the former view of history might have been retained, but without refusing them, it would seem impossible to continue studying historic events and results of men's free will. For a certain mode of the government was established, or certain migrations of people took place in the consequence of such geographic economical additions. then the free will of the individuals will appear to have us and establish that the mode of government, occasionally immigrations, never be regarded as a cause. Seeing the laws of astronomy destroys religion, and the law of gravitation as a weapon against religion. Just so it seems as if we have only to admit the law of inevitability to destroy the conception of the soul, of the good and evil, instructions of the sake of church that had been built up on the conceptions. So too, in his time, the defenders of law in history, like the law corporations of astronomy, far from destroying, even strengthening the foundation on the institutions of the state church art. As the question of astronomy then, the question of history now, the whole difference of opinion is based on recognition or no non-recognition of something absolute, serving the measure of visible non-recognition. In astronomy, it wasn't the movability of the earth. In history, it is independent of personality of free will. As astronomy, the difficulty of recognizing the motion of the earth lay in abandoning the immediate satisfaction of the earth's fixity of the motion of the planets spinning. So history, the difficulty of recognizing the subjection of personality to the laws of space-time, and causes lies to renounce the direct feeling of the independence of one's own personality. But the astronomy, the new view said, it is true that we do not feel the movement of the earth, but admitting its mobility, we arrive absurdly by admitting its motion, which we do not feel. We arrive at laws, so also in the history. The new view says it is true that we absurdly, while admitting the dependence on the external world, on time, and on causes, we arrive at laws. In first case, necessary recount the consensuous of the unreal mobility in space to recognize a motion that we did not feel. In the present case, it is similarly necessary to recount a freedom that does not exist and to recognize an independence of which we do not are conscious. Let's go! Alright, notes. Tolstoy made minor errors that non-consistent magic facts of the narrative, and then external errors that were mistaken in the historical, geographic, or the beginning. Tolstoy tells us she is 13, but in 1809 she's 16. And uncertainly over the regiment of Boris Trubetskoy belongs to the Guards, but he later writes Nicholas Rostov from the regiment. Whoa. Also, these notes include many of the 1930th century edition of War and Peace. These are marked by the and after notes, and the notes are with Russian life and manners. The map of Europe drew his military and geographic facts changed considerably since 1013. Austerlitz, for example, it's the town formerly in Czechoslovakia, but now in Slovakia. There is differences are notes down below. In Tolstoy's time, Russian and the Orthodox Christian nations followed by Julian calendars, which differs to Gregorian calendars by 12 days. Russia adopted the new style calendar at the beginning of 12th century. Appropriate dates have been given in both calendars. Can't read this is Spanish. The context suggests that the terrors is a serf. Thousands of rubles would been purchased, 8 or 10 serfs, keeping her other names, and changed her Christian name from Natalia to Maria. He is not the only Laos who made use of her friction. And you accept to make an outcome of the government. So does the score things, consisting of the fish, cheese, caviar, usually taken with a vodka, to the proverb that suits us down to the ground. The Russian general who commanded an Austro-Russian force that have invaded Italy in April 1799, the occupied Hollow. I just asked you that. Boston, a 4-handed card game with 2 packs of cards. The special permissions had been obtained into the marriage. For example, the Daniel Cooper Tolstoy refers to here, a bastard. And everything follows from I bless you. The tower was originally applied to the field of marshals, but time it was used for all generals reached the 3rd highest grade of generalship. The little one is charming, a form of Nicholas, the express of endearment. A Russian nurse attempts to say in French, little children go to bed and sleep. A former crown land of Austria and between Poland and Ukraine. The Turkish foreign who supplied the Turks with regular cavalry. The 2 places are close together. Nothing came to these degrees beyond purely formal changes at the court and certain amounts of bribery and secure deployments. These were the 5th and 6th grades of the 14th inch service of the equivalent of the ranks in lieutenant colonel and the colonel in the army. Committee de Public Committee on the Public Safety. Count Alexei 1769 to 1834, military advisor to Tsar Alexander and the Minister of War 1808. His politics, especially those who had portrayed to the Minister of War in 1808, portraying the establishment of the military colonies, were considered reactionary to Tolstoy's critical attitude to him that can be detected in Prince Andrew's response in this scene. Celia is a relative in common for Alexei. Celia in Russian means force. Count V.P. Trubetskoy, 1768 to 1834, Minister of Interior from 1802 to 1807, one of Tsar Alexander and more liberal advisors. Count M.L., one of 1778 to 1855, one of Tsar Alexander's response for implementing deploys and policies on the universal education in the early 1820s. Hi. Had been bribed by him. Tolstoy's reference here is the diary of Sir Robert Wilson, 1777, of Wilson's diary were published in a Russian magazine in 1862, 3 years before the first 38 chapters of a work Tolstoy titled 1801, i.e. War and Peace, appeared in the same journal. Over the French history of the year 1812, the character of Kutuzov reflects on the unsatisfactory results of the battle in Krasno by L.T. Bagration. Tolstoy's note. The pyramids, a reference to Napoleon's address and the troops in Egypt before the Battle of the Pyramids on 21 July 21, 1798. The 80 degrees of frost, i.e. about the negative 22 centigrade. Long live Henry IV, a violent long, the devil of four, who had therefore talent for drinking, fighting, and being a gallant. Grand Duke Konstantin Pavlovich, 1779 to 1831. The Tsars Alexander Brothers. Order of St. George of the First Class to the Order of St. George was founded by Catherine the Seldom, given its star and cross attached to a ribbon. Simple is here in the sense of common of the Russia is unnatural. Some years has passed by and now it's 1820. Fotis, 1792 to 1838, head of monastery at FWG, a German philosopher, D. 1768, 1848, French writer of the Royalist foreign minister during the restoration of the author of the novels. Alright. Arching, a measurement of length as for the example of the cloths used in Russian Turkey. The Bible of the Russian Bible Society, founded by on 1818 three Tsars Nicholas and I in 1826. 4. Madame Kadar, 1766, a mollustic and self-confessed pro-heresy without face or law. The Cossack leader of the rebellion on the Volga during 1773 to 1775, that bears his name. A German patriotic league founded in 1808 and secretly detected the overthrow of Napoleon. Makes play similarity of the German World Bomb in the Union and the Russian World Bomb riot. I am your man, sir. I am your man. The Republican of Pierre Laffy, 1828 to 1877, author of Napoleon, 1867. 1805 to 1871, German historian and Sheikh scholar. 1776 to 1861, professor of the history at the University of Heidelberg and the author of Washington, 1843 to 1857, history of this world. Napoleon or Napoleon III was arrested in 1814 for trying to seize power and was sentenced to life imprisonment. And he escaped England 6 years later and was on the French throne when the War and Peace was published, but he was deposed in 1871 after the France-Prussian War. Then is destroyed, 1713 to 1784. French cockpilot, playwright, and an agent author, 1775. 1784. Princess Andrei Trubetskoy, c. 1528 to 1583. Ivans of the Terribles, principal boyars of the 11th century, and the ministers of the tributes wandering of the minstrels of often nightly the ranks in the conflict in 1866 occurred in wireless during the Rhine War and Peace, i.e., that the sun of the centuries of the solar system, the warm earth that of the satellites, and the discovery of the Polish astronomy, Nicholas 1473 to 1543, supervised as a Ptolemaic system of astronomy. Let's go! Done.